Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really embarking on quite a journey, I think. We're looking at history, spirituality, exploring these figures called divine educators. Our main source here is a fascinating article based directly on some answered questions by Abdu'l-Bahá.
That's right. A really rich text to draw from.
So for you listening, the big question we're tackling is this. What does it actually mean for certain historical figures to be seen as, well, divine educators?
And importantly, how did their influence fundamentally change things? Reshape the world, really.
Exactly.
And what our sources show is, well, these figures tended to appear in really dark times, historically speaking.
Dark time.
Yeah, periods of profound darkness. And they had this singular mission, guiding humanity.
Yeah.
Both spiritually and, socially. Transformation.
So we'll be looking at how each one, in their own way, brought some light, some progress.
Precisely. How they navigated their specific challenges and eras.
Okay. So our goal here is to pull out the key insights, the sort of nuggets of knowledge about these really powerful figures.
Helping you understand their core messages, their impact.
And maybe uncover some, well, surprising connections, too. Let's see.
Sounds good.
So let's start by setting the scene. This idea of divine guidance. The sources say these educators appeared in times of darkness. What does that really mean? Is it just like bad times or something more specific?
It's generally referring to eras marked by serious moral decline, maybe deep conflict, injustice, or even just spiritual emptiness.
The kind of stagnation.
Yeah, exactly. Where society seems lost, needing direction. Their purpose was always to lift humanity out of that.
Yeah.
Spark change. Real profound change.
Not just small tweaks.
No, not just reformers in the usual sense. They were more like catalysts for civilization itself.
Okay, catalysts. So that brings us to our first figure, Abraham, or Ibrahim, as the sources refer to him.
Oh.
His story starts in Mesopotamia, and his family, they were idol worshippers.
That's the tradition, yes.
So it's
steeped in it.
But he breaks from that. The sources really emphasize his rejection of polytheism.
Right.
What was the key moment there? What set him apart?
Well, what's fascinating is his proclamation of one God, the oneness of God. This wasn't just a theological idea. It was radical.
How so?
Because it directly challenged the power structures of his time. Rulers often claimed authority through, multiple gods.
Okay, so it was political too.
Very much so. And this led to his exile. But the exile, interestingly, wasn't the end. It sort of became the foundation.
The foundation for what?
For the progress of Abraham's descendants, as the source puts it.
Yeah.
It established this sacred lineage that the texts trace forward.
Right, lineage including Moses, Christ, Muhammad.
The Bab and Baha'u'lláh, yes.
Yeah.
It's an incredible impact stemming from that initial brave stand. Generational.
Wow. Okay, from Abraham the patriarch, let's move to Moses, Mūsá. Here, the sources paint a really stark contrast. He starts out as a fugitive shepherd accused of murder.
Right. Quite the beginning.
And then he achieves this monumental feat, freeing the Israelites from Egyptian tyranny. How does that happen? How does a fugitive shepherd manage that?
It's an extraordinary transformation, isn't it? The sources explain it as divine empowerment. He essentially transformed a degraded people into a civilized nation.
That's a huge claim.
It is. And the influence, according to the text, went beyond the Israelites. It mentions Greek philosophers, even Socrates learning from Israel's wisdom later on.
Really? Socrates.
That's what the source suggests, yeah. Connecting the threads. And think about this detail. Moses had a stammer. A human limitation, you'd think.
Right.
Yet he was empowered to deliver these enduring laws, these teachings that shaped history. It shows that divine will, in this view, overcomes apparent weakness.
Powerful idea. Okay, moving forward again, we get to Christ. Isa.
Yeah.
His mission, the sources say, involved abolishing some older Jewish laws and preaching universal love, aiming to unite warring nations.
A message of unity and love, fundamentally. But there's a paradox, isn't there?
You mean his crucifixion?
Exactly. Crucified by his own people, according to the narrative. Yet, his teachings didn't die. They spread globally.
Far beyond Judea.
Far beyond. Across the Roman Empire and further. The sources actually quote a prophecy mentioned in relation to him. This sun will rise. My grace will encompass the world.
And it argues that this was fulfilled.
It argues it was fulfilled, yes. Demonstrating a spiritual power that physical opposition couldn't contain. That message of universal love really did resonate across cultures and time.
Okay. Next up, Muhammad. The setting is 7th century Arabia. described in the texts as a place of tribal violence and ignorance. Pretty challenging context.
Extremely challenging. Deeply entrenched issues.
So how did his mission tackle those? What did he actually do?
Well, he introduced some truly radical reforms for that time and place. Things like outlawing infanticide, the killing of infants.
Which practice, then?
Apparently so, yes.
Oh.
He also limited polygamy, which was widespread, and significantly offered protection to Jews and Christians living under Islamic rule.
Creating a kind of social order.
A new societal framework, yes. Fostering stability, justice, where there was mostly chaos before. And this raises another interesting point the source brings up.
What's that?
The Quran's insight. Specifically, a verse about astronomy. It says, the sun moves in a fixed place.
And why is that significant?
Because this was centuries before modern science reached similar conclusions about the sun's motion within the galaxy. It suggests a kind of knowledge beyond the time.
A connection between spiritual revelation and understanding the natural world.
Exactly. A holistic view, long before we might expect it scientifically.
Fascinating. Okay, from Muhammad, who established this new order, we shift to the Bab.
Yes, the haircut.
And his background is surprising, right? The source calls him an uneducated merchant.
Correct. Not from the clerical class, not formally educated in theology in the traditional sense.
Yet he confounded Persia's clergy with divine knowledge. How did that play out? What impact did he have?
It was explosive. It caused a huge stir. He challenged the religious establishment directly, and because of this, he faced intense persecution.
Leading to his martyrdom.
Yes, a brutal martyrdom, as the text describes it.
Yeah.
But despite this, or maybe because of it in some ways, thousands were drawn to his message, his cause.
So what was his main role, according to this perspective?
His pivotal role was being the herald of Bahá'u'lláh. He was preparing the way, signaling that a new major revelation was imminent, setting the stage.
Preparing humanity for what was next.
Precisely.
Which leads us straight to Bahá'u'lláh.
Indeed.
And his story involves dramatic exile, too, from Persia all the way to Akka, in what's now Israel.
A prison city at the time, a penal colony.
Right. But the source says he managed to transform this prison into a spiritual capital. How does it explain such a radical shift? How does a prisoner achieve that?
The text calls it a miracle of influence. It's quite remarkable. Despite being physically imprisoned for decades, his teachings, his influence spread across the globe.
From a prison cell.
From a prison cell. His spiritual authority somehow transcended the physical walls. There's even a specific detail mentioned.
Go on.
About European leaders, like Napoleon III. Bahá'u'lláh sent warnings or admonishments to certain rulers. Napoleon ignored his, and the source notes his subsequent fall from power.
Wow. Implying a direct consequence.
It implies a potency to his words, a spiritual authority that had real-world resonance, even from confinement. His call was universal. Summon me, that truth might be distinguished from error. It echoes the core mission of all these figures.
Okay, let's try and unpack this a bit. We've gone through Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, Baha'u'lláh, 6 major figures. After hearing all these stories, what are the common threads? What ties them together in this framework? What's the big picture?
Well, the first most obvious theme is what the source calls divine education.
Divine education.
Meaning
All right.
each one of these prophets, despite facing incredible hardship, persecution.
Often from their own people.
Often, yes. Despite all that, they succeeded in uplifting humanity. They introduced principles, laws, ideas that genuinely advanced civilization in their time and beyond.
So it's a consistent pattern of guidance emerging from adversity.
Exactly. Guidance fighting against the darkness, you could say. They were educators, but on a divine or cosmic scale.
And this education, it's not static, is it? Here's where it gets really interesting for me. This idea the sources mentioned called progressive revelation.
Yes, that's a crucial concept here.
What does it mean exactly?
It basically means that God's guidance isn't delivered all at once in a single fixed package. It unfolds progressively. It evolves.
Yeah.
To match humanity's capacity, society's needs at different points in history. Think of it like a divine curriculum that adapts as the student's humanity mature.
So each new revelation builds on the last.
It builds upon it, confirms the essential truths, but also brings new teachings, new laws suited for the challenges and opportunities of that specific age, gradually unfolding more truth as we're ready for it.
Okay, that makes sense. So tying it all together, what does this mean for us? The sources talk about rational proofs for their divine status. How do we connect their impact to this claim of a divine mission?
Well, the argument presented is that their impact itself is the proof. Look at the profound, lasting transformation these figures brought about.
The changes in civilizations, laws, ethics.
Precisely. Their influence wasn't just fleeting. It reshaped societies, established moral frameworks, inspired millions across centuries. The question becomes, how could individuals, often starting with no worldly power, often persecuted?
Like Moses the fugitive or Bahá'u'lláh the prisoner.
Exactly. How could they achieve such monumental, enduring change? The source suggests that this itself points to a power beyond the ordinary human capacity.
A divine source.
That's the conclusion drawn. As Abdu'l-Bahá puts it in the text we're drawing from, the world of existence stands in utmost need of an educator through celestial power. The evidence, it argues, is written across history and the progress they initiated.
What an incredible sweep of history and thought we've covered today. This deep dive, it really highlights this consistent pattern, doesn't it?
This thread of divine educators appearing throughout history.
A pattern of light emerging in difficult times, again and again.
Definitely. And it's key to remember, as the source emphasizes, it wasn't just about shifting beliefs in the abstract.
Right.
Their work had tangible results.
Yeah.
Elevating society, establishing foundational laws, fostering unity, adapting guidance to keep humanity moving forward.
Towards a more enlightened state, perhaps?
What seems to be the direction, yes.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to take away from this. Considering this incredible, enduring legacy of these figures we've discussed, what does their collective mission, this whole idea of progressive divine education, tell us about our own times? About the potential, maybe even the need, for continued spiritual and social guidance today?
A very relevant question to ponder.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.